You're listening to Dramas Over Flowers with Seo-hae, Anisa and Paroma. Welcome to our last spoiled yak of the year, I think. There may actually be another, but don't quote me on that. This one is real Shigan Yoheng business. If you don't know that phrase yet and you love time travel, it's definitely time to learn it. Get it? Get it? We start off the episode by taking a broader look at how K-drama treats sci-fi stories before we get into the specifics of Sisyphus, where, once again, Paroma allows me to shout at her as we tentacle the thing apart and decide whether it deserves to be put back together. You know what though, here's the spoiler version. Sisyphus wasn't perfect, but it had a lot of good stuff in it. So we talk about what was perfect and what squandered potential, how Seung-woo plays a trash friend you still kinda love, and how action Barbie Park Shin-hye is actually one of our favourite Park Shin-hyes. So even if you didn't watch or didn't like this show, listen in. But before we go there, a few other things. I hope you guys are ready and excited for our year-end yak. It's our favourite episode of the year and it's when we hand out our precious Goguma Awards. You guys made it so special and amazing last year by sending in your voice notes, and we would dearly, dearly love to do the same this year. So if you'd like to take part, it's super easy. Just make a recording no longer than 2 minutes on what stood out to you most in 2021. The good, the bad, the unyeppo. Whether that's a drama, a trend, a trope, or all of the above. And, don't forget to introduce yourself at the start, otherwise no one will know who you are. Then just send it off to us at dramasoverflowers@gmail.com, or upload it directly to the Dropbox link in the show notes. If you're not sure what you've watched this year, or, if you're like me, what even this year is, don't forget to go grab yourself a free and fantastically useful K-drama tracker as made by Paroma, probably when she was meant to be doing something else, but we deeply appreciate your service, P. Thank you. Another way you can join in is by voting for your favourite dramas of the year. Just click the poll link in the show notes. This is a whole new award and we're excited to see what you guys will pick. So is Goguma. He doesn't give his children away easily, you know. You must work. There's still plenty of time to play in our annual one-shot drama reviews on Twitter under its shiny new hashtag, DramasOver2021. If you just like to lurk, browse the tag for a whole lot of punchy and succinct reviews, or come check out our Twitter where we retweet them all. Lastly, every day is an appreciation day here at Goguma HQ. To our listeners and our patrons, your support is what gives us so much joy and keeps us from drowning. We are incredibly blessed that you allow us into your lives via a variety of magical metal boxes, and that from all the corners of the world where you listen to us, write to us, yell at us, and laugh along with us, we get to be part of your story. Most of our gratitude resides in our hearts. Some of it makes its way onto Patreon, in the form of the little extra episodes, with the occasional blooper reel thrown in to keep us humble and silly. You'll find those at patreon.com/dramasoverflowers. And don't worry, some of us are always a little sillier than we need to be. And since this may be my last intro reel of the year, I'ma slide a couple of love notes under the door for the two terrible miscreants without whom I would not be doing this podcast. You guys may not know this, but Paroma is legit a wizard, and Anisa is legit a queen. The non-despotic kind, of course. And the only thing bigger than their brains are their hearts. Anisa and Paroma, you are simply the most muchin yojas in K-drama land and beyond. Gong Yu ain't got nothing on you. Neither does Yusung. Well, anyway, should we get into this episode? This episode is brought to you by Kensington's newest title, And They Lived Happily Ever After, by critically acclaimed South African author Therese Bahari. In this sparkling Own Voices novel, Bahari delivers a magical romantic comedy set in Cape Town about a woman who is literally living her dreams, and conjuring a real-life hero out of them. Successful romance author Gaia Anders has a secret. Anything she dreams at night is magically written into her best-selling novels. After a lonely childhood in foster care, her dream life is the only one she trusts. Gaia's waking life just can't compare, until she gets caught utterly by surprise by one near-perfect guy. That guy is workaholic businessman Jacob Scott, who's had a crush on his brother's best friend Gaia since forever. But he never expected to literally share her dreams. This could be a K-drama, guys. And They Lived Happily Ever After is a book full of heart, heat, and smart banter, my favouriteest thing, from a rising author and perfect for fans of Talia Hibbert, Abby Jimenez, and Alicia Rai. You can find And They Lived Happily Ever After by Therese Bahari wherever books are sold. Find out more at kensingtonbooks.com. Hi everyone, this is Saya.
This is Paroma, and today we bring you a spoiled yak of Sisyphus.
You know, I was about to introduce myself as sci-fi. I was like, hi everyone, this is Sai.
Okay. You know what's funnier? Because our introduction usually goes, "Hi, I'm Saya, Anisa, Paroma." I was gonna introduce myself as Anisa because I was like, "There's a gap there that needs to be filled."
Like, this is staying in, right?
Yeah.
There was this one time I was recording an intro, and intros take 50,000 times to get right. So I was like, yeah, hi, this is Saya, blah, blah, blah. And at one point I was like, hi, this is Anisa. Why am I introducing myself as Anisa?
Listeners, when we say we are recording the intro, we mean the part absolutely at the beginning where we are explaining what the episode's about before all of us jump in together.
Yeah. So that's how professional
I think it's because Anisa's like our standard and we default to that. Oh, poor girl.
The queen we aspire to be.
Yeah. Okay. So Sisyphus. Yeah. This was a long promised episode because it's a bit polarizing, this drama. We have some people who really hated it, a lot of people who left it after the first couple of weeks, and you have us who kind of loved it.
I kind of would argue that it's not polarizing. I think it was almost universally really not enjoyed. And we're the weirdos who are like, no, actually, you all watched it wrong. It was a good drama with a few flaws. But then I guess that's kind of the reason why we're doing this, because like both of us are sci-fi fans when it comes to TV anyway. I actually really hate sci-fi in books and I don't read it. But for some reason, sci-fi on TV really works for me. And K-drama doesn't have a lot of hard sci-fi going for it. So Sisyphus is a rarity in the K-drama landscape anyway. So, I mean, inevitably, it's going to have its hiccups, but I think people often forgot because of the high-power casting, because, you know, Park Shin-hye, Cho Seung-woo, they forgot that this is a genre drama. And genre drama isn't always for everyone.
True. And the thing is that I think the K-drama audience is far too used to magic realism in its speculative fiction variety of dramas, like where things are not just, you know, contemporary storytelling. It's about something, a larger idea. It's more theme-based than it is just character-based. And magic realism works. Think of any fantasy drama. Everything like Mystic Pop-Up Bar probably is more magic realism, whereas you have the King Eternal Monarch is more fantasy. Though, I mean, it can go either ways because they don't really explain the rules of the world much. There's a lot of hand-waving and, ooh, magic. And you just have to work.
And the rules are not the point.
Yeah, the rules are never the point, true. Whereas with hard sci-fi like this, the purer it is, the more rule-focused it is. And yes, you can absolutely argue that something like a time machine, the uploader in this drama, in Sisyphus, you never really get an explanation about how the uploader is built. Of course you don't. Nobody knows how a time machine is built. It's quantum. Just live with that. But
it's by its nature inexplicable to mere mortals.
Exactly. If we could explain that, then we would have
an
uploader. The thing to note here is that the rules here really matter. The entire story is about the rules of the timelines, how they mix what happens if Park Shin-hye succeeds in her mission and kind of eradicates the ending of this particular time. I mean, what happens if she messes with the past and succeeds in stopping the war? And nobody actually knows. I mean, even the characters don't seem to know until the very end when we kind of get an answer. And there are a lot of theories about how the timelines function. Saya did this amazing diagram that's up on our blog. We'll link to that. Just look at it. If you don't understand how the timelines work, just go and look at her explanation. She explains it beautifully and has done a hand-drawn diagram that needs to be seen.
Only because I can't do it in Paint or whatever fancy software people use to do art. But the basic thrust of that diagram was, we're actually going to talk about this a little later, but I'll say briefly right now, that the narrative structure of Sisyphus is not a linear narrative. And that was a really, really key point. And we will talk about this later, because otherwise I'll skip ahead.
We're trying
to keep to the order.
Yeah. Okay, Anisa would be so proud of us.
Right. Well, one of the most important things that you have to do in hard sci-fi, which you can do more easily in like magical realism or in a fantasy show, and you don't need to do it all in just an ordinary show. I mean, you do, but not in the same way, the world building. And I think Sisyphus actually really excelled in its world building, and it steered away from doing that, the exposition dumps and things like that. Like, it did what is called soft world building. So it introduced the world and the rules of the world and how everything worked in it in a very organic, natural way. And it did introduce a lot of those elements a little more slowly than people liked. And I think that's why a lot of people left the show, because it was taking too much time. But if you stuck around, it was very rewarding, I found.
Yeah.
If you sort of cracked the structure.
I probably would have. See, the thing is that I often flippantly say that I would have stopped watching this if it wasn't for your enthusiasm for the drama. And because we had committed to doing reviews, so I had to keep watching. But that's not true. I like both these actors so much. Jo Seung-woo and Park Shin-hye are both incredible actors, and I like their characters. I had complaints in the first, I think, 3 episodes. I had complaints about Park Shin-hye's characters only so much as I loved how amazing she was at fighting. And I loved that she was the one who was, basically just dragging him from here to there, trying to rescue him. And he was like this hapless, helpless being. I loved that dynamic, but I also felt a little frustrated because the show wasn't doing info dumping. It was doing the exact opposite.
Right.
They weren't giving us any information. And I was like, okay, we are driving blind. And Park Shin-hye's character is a sphinx, which is the most frustrating character in Dramaland. And how long is this supposed to be? I need to know something about her backstory. What exactly about her am I supposed to sympathize with? She's the one with the great, glorious mission, and I don't know how it happened. But then I think around the second week, episode 4-ish, we have that flashback or flash forward to the post-apocalyptic world where
third week.
Yeah.
It was episode. No, it was not even. It was episode 7.
No. So I said that in the video. I was wrong. It was actually episode 4 where they first did that. Where Park Shin-hye is just walking around and listening to
right, you're
BTS.
Right.
Yeah. They just gave us that snippet, and I was hooked. Now they didn't give us any more information. Then we had to wait for week 3, I think, which episode 7-ish, where they started giving us actual meaty information about her. But dude, that one glimpse of her life in the post-apocalyptic world, which I think it was D. Tennant who had called her post-apocalyptic Barbie, which is actually kind of appropriate. But I loved it. I loved how pink everything was, how much she loved fluffy, soft things. But she was also ready to gun down wolves.
Fighter.
Yeah, it's just, wow.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this version of Action Girl Park Shin-hye. I think I've talked about it in 3 other episodes already. But, we are so used to seeing women as what is it? Not as action girls. There aren't enough action girls in KDrama land.
Yeah.
And you can't always do it perfectly.
I mean, occasionally you get a Park Bo-young type of action girl, like the strong girl, the Bong-soon. And no, I mean, yes.
I did enjoy that. I mean, I enjoyed that as a character, but the story didn't work.
The thing that I object to is the peculiar and grating reverse sexism thing. And okay, I know that's not a thing, but you know how the drama did that, where they were basically the women. If the entire idea of the drama seemed to be that if women were stronger than men, they would abuse men. That's what I came out of the drama thinking. It's true of the hero and heroine. It's true of Park Bo-young's character's parents. Her mom constantly abused her dad. And these were all supposed to be super loving relationships. And I was like, why? Why must you? Because usually what we get in Dramaland is really clever women. And they might be really good with guns, But in physical combat, that's this entire niche that's given solely to men. Female characters aren't usually very physically, I mean, they might be athletic, but they are not fighters.
They're not action heavy.
Yeah, they're not action
like their
heavy.
character description is not that they're a fighter. Yeah, that's
exactly.
because you do, for example, like women who play detectives, and you know my whole thing with playing everyone needs to play a detective, which I've never talked about like on air, but I have this belief that everyone is improved. I'm going to write about this one day.
Please do. I love
when
this
I get
theory.
over my procrastination.
Who was it? Who was it mostly? It was Hyungin Shuk. What's Hyung Shik?
Park Hyung-sik?
What am I doing to his name? I'm so sorry, poor boy. Park Hyung-sik, right? You were like, he hasn't played a detective yet, but once he does.
Yeah, he hasn't. He needs to, but he has played a crown prince, so that counts. Like you either like. It's crown princes and rugged detectives. It's got to be both. And you know, like Yoo Seung-woo, Yo Jin-gu, all of those people have done that. True. And yeah, Park Hyung-sik hasn't done it yet. He needs to. His at least one of his next roles needs to be a rugged detective. And even like Eddy Kim, who that's a digression. Never mind.
Yeah, but to be revisited.
We will come back to this one day. And now I've lost the thread of whatever it was that we were saying. Action Girls, and where the show so for you it turned just on that little glimpse, which is funny because you were like not into it even after that point, and I was still going even though I hadn't got that I'm here for this moment.
No,
episode 7.
Okay, sorry. Finish. Okay. Finish. I'll come back to it. I promise I'll come back. Finish.
Okay. For me, episode 7 was that point. And, you know, you're talking about 4th week now, so I've already gone through 3 weeks. And I think part of it is because I'd committed to reviewing it. And when you commit to reviewing something, you're there for the ride no matter what happens. Unless it's so egregious that you can't, you know, finish it like Record of Youth, which continues to this day not to have a finale week review.
It was so bad.
Well, I'm sorry, we're digressing so much. It's me. I know it's me. It's always me.
It's both of us.
Back on track. Yeah, so I think that little flash that we had earlier, it did interest me, but it didn't like completely suck me in the way episode 7 did. And you're right, like once we saw where Seo-hae came from and what kind of a world she was in, it made her as a character suddenly come so alive. And because she'd been quite flat before that, and she barely said anything before that, she was just this sort of silent, stoic fighter. And, you know, like Anisa said this earlier, that action does not a character arc make. So she finally took on life. And when she did, she was such a fascinating and interesting character that you could not help, or I could not help but be entirely sucked in, because that's also when all of the time elements started being important.
Yeah.
And that's like crack to me. Everything to do with time and how the future or the past interacts with the things that are happening in what is the present of the show. And like that moment, I think it was the end of episode 7 where she finds the diary and you're like, that's her body. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the part I was like, oh my God. That was my turning point.
Okay, so see, actually, yes, exactly. Me too. In that, I became invested in the story around episode 7 once we actually got the meat of her side of the story. And then again, the entire drama did this pivot where in the first 6 episodes, it was all Taesul this, Taesul that, Taesul's grief over his brother, Taesul being arrogant with his friend. It just all Taesul and how brilliant he is, which I didn't mind because it's Seung-woo.
Because I enjoyed it, yeah.
Yeah, but it was not a story. It was just, I mean, what does that to do with time travel? I mean, give me the perspective of the time traveler, and they finally did in episode 7. But the reason I mentioned episode 4 is because once they did that walk around post-apocalyptic, I think, was it Seoul or was it somewhere else? Busan? Like which town or city were they in? It was not Seoul, I think.
I actually don't know. I assumed it was Seoul.
No, but remember they took a train from Seoul to some other... Okay, so whichever city that was.
Yeah.
So she was just walking around the city that she had been born in, and it was just all like trees and crushed buildings and old shops that are mostly empty, but there are canned goods, and she's scavenging those, and she's just walking around. There's a corpse.
That was the
She
theme
goes
perk.
to investigate it, takes out the wallet, throws away the money. And yeah, there's a rat.
And pockets the coins.
She
I thought
loves
that
the
was so
coins.
interesting. Because metal has value.
Yeah.
What value does paper have except as kindling? Like, do you remember when what's his name says that afterwards?
Sigma, yeah.
In the future, this is just kindling.
And he had stacks of that in his room, and he was just shoving them away.
Such great imagery.
That was okay. We'll come to Sigma, but so because there's a lot to be said there. And Seo-hae was so interesting in just those, I think, 5 to 10 minutes of just her that we got in that. It was a pretty slow segment in the middle of a drama, but it finally gave me a sense of her, and that was enough for me to stay. Because in the first 3 episodes, I was enjoying the action, but it got repetitive really fast and there was not enough explanation happening. So I was kind of hoping for something, and that scene kept me in. And I was like, okay, so now I know a little bit more of her, and I kept my fingers crossed and I hope for more story, which happened episode 7, where the drama suddenly shifted and they were like, you know what, Seo-hae makes a better hero. Let's focus on her perspective. And that was it just worked for me after that. It finally clicked.
So, see, I actually think that the show always knew that Seo-hae was the hero. But the problem was that they had Seung-woo.
Yeah.
And then you're like, But see, this is that point in episode 7, and we talked about how we talk about how the pacing was weird, and
no,
so
we
there
haven't,
was all this
we haven't
floppy.
covered that yet.
Basically, it was really like the tension of the story was really floppy, and episode 7 was where it sort of wound it so tight, and that was where it reminded us, or perhaps revealed to us, actually Seo-hae is the hero. But the show had this built into its premise from the start. It becomes a question of like directing and how they chose to tell the story at that point.
But the problem with the way it was directed, I mean, aside from the editing issues, the pacing issues, everything that frustrated me, we have covered that extensively in previous Yaks, so we won't go too much into that. The problem with it was, after Sisyphus had finished up, and I released this video called Seo-hae is the Real Sisyphus, I went into Reddit and other places to read, because I tend to wait to have like my take uploaded before I go and read other people's takes, so that I'm not subconsciously stealing from other people.
I think we all do that.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I went in there and I was so stunned to find that there were other people arguing who was the real Sisyphus, Sigma or Taesul. That was the argument.
Oh,
Most
okay.
people didn't even consider Seo-hae a legitimate contender. It's Sigma, right? Or it's Taesul, right? I mean, that was the actual conversation. But that is the fault of the directing. You can't give Taesul the first 6 episodes fully and then also the finale, which we'll get to.
Expect people to realize that actually he's not the main character.
It's Seo-hae who's always making the decision to go back each time and try again and again. She is Sisyphus. Oh my God, do you not know the story of Sisyphus? How are you mixing this up?
I have a confession, though.
Yeah.
All of that said, I think I was one of those people. And until you had said it in your video, I was like, oh my God, she's right. And how did I miss this? Because it's so plain to see. But then also that is how I missed it, because of all the reasons that you said.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't want to focus on the negative things of the drama, but I have to say that these days, when director Jin-hyuk is helming a drama, I'm not as excited as I used to be. I sort of wonder, okay, what are you going to do wrong this time? Because I'm beginning to think, his dramas are really gorgeous. They're always so beautiful, right? But I'm beginning to think City Hunter is an anomaly among his dramas.
Yeah, sadly.
Because, think of Legend of the Blue Sea. There was Doctor Stranger. His other dramas. Prosecutor Princess was pre-City Hunter, so I'll be like, okay, that was before your peak. And then Master's Son, and all of his dramas are so beautiful.
Oh, but with Master's Sons, Hong sisters had full control. He couldn't derail the story.
Yeah, I mean, the Hong sisters are another story of self-derailing. So,
who are the writers, by the way, audience? I'm sorry. Sometimes we just say things without realizing. Hong sisters are these really influential old school writers who have done amazing work, and they wrote Master's Son. and were in full control.
But I mean, that, again, a pair that we'll talk about another day.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jin-hyuk, I'm not sure he's got a certain touch, but he's falling into that group of
Overindulgent.
who, yeah, the director of is it the first season of Forest of Secrets, aka Stranger, Angiro, who also did Watcher, but he also did Record of Youth. And you're like, what happened to you?
We were so excited because he was directing. I mean, how?
Yeah, I wonder if it's a genre thing. Because I feel like this Sisyphus is closer to the old Jin-hyuk, but there's also still bad choices. But we will not go to that.
We will not go to that, yeah. And also, it's not like he's not... You see his experience when he finally decides to give us the story. It's actually done really well. The time travel is a difficult concept to explain or, show in any kind of story. Usually it's a mess and leaves audiences completely confused. And I wasn't confused by Sisyphus's timeline at any point because they had taken care. I mean, yes, they had given us information practically through a drip set. It was so slow. But even so, when everything fell into place and they finally started telling the story at a faster trot, it was good. It was really good.
Yeah.
His directing can be good. It's just that it's just that I don't know what.
I think, my theory here is that if you look at it in writing, imagine this story as something that you read.
It would be an excellent book.
Exactly.
Oh.
But then think about having to translate that from, and it's very subtle. Some of those things are really subtle. The things that we complain weren't foreshadowed. For example, the, the control bureau and the planned incompetence that they had. I can see that being written into the script. And even when they did the flashback, towards the end where Seo-hae realizes, or somebody realizes that, all of this was meant to be, even the flashback didn't show it well. And I think it's perhaps the inherent difficulty of translating something so subtle in writing, but there and evident, into something that is visual. Because once it's visual, it sort of almost stops being subtle, because that's the nature of having to put something in front of somebody's eyes.
Yeah.
But also, that said, I think another difficulty was presented by the structure of the narrative, which is highly, highly unusual in any kind of drama, I guess. I think Western dramas have a lot more practice. They've got decades behind them of doing time travel. Whereas don't forget that K-drama is still quite new to doing this genre. And, when it comes to TV, you've got to make what sells. So there's not always a lot of incentive to make a genre drama. And it's also a highly experimental place, but it's balancing the risks of, the financial risk of doing a drama that may not have the kind of viewer payoff that a standard romance or melodrama or thriller might have, but also being able to give yourself time to tell a particular story. And the thing with Sisyphus is that it needed the time. One, because it needed its world building, but two, it was also setting up a very specific type of narrative. And this is where we get into the part that I really once I understood this, I was oh, it got my brain in that special way where I'm oh, this is so, oh, I love it. So they had this and throw away the idea that the structure of Sisyphus was linear. This is a time travel drama. Linear is always hard. Time travel doing linear is not, it's very pedestrian. You can't really play with it if you do it that way.
Yeah, true.
So the structure of Sisyphus is actually circular or a ring structure. So it's got this story, and it's from your episode 1, you start both at the end, you start at the end and at the beginning. And each successive step into the narrative is a step towards the center. And the center of this narrative is D-Day, is Apocalypse.
Yeah.
And so once you sort of have that structure in your mind, this is the kind of thing I'd really appreciate, and I love this whenever I see it anywhere else, is this intricate construction of a big picture. You have to look at the thing in in full, or at least clock onto that structure to be able to understand how cool it is that they've done it this way.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people don't have the patience for that, but I'm glad that I did.
But which is why it's a genre drama, because it has a particular niche audience in mind. It's peculiar that jTBC thought that this kind of story should be their 10th year anniversary, hurrah. But I mean, yay for us. So
Yeah. There are times where you're like, oh, they spent so much money on this. Damn.
I appreciated every penny spent on that dive from the roof to the bottom across that like
That was
shiny glass surface. I mean, what was that? How are they alive?
Did you watch the BTS?
I did.
Yeah, that was so...
Jo Seung-woo trying to be a wimp over and over again was the best BTS ever.
Yeah.
I mean, they clearly had so much fun shooting this. It's just, all is forgiven. But okay, I had a slight rebuttal to your point about how difficult it is to adapt a story that works really well as a written piece into the screen. But you know that with adaptation, the job of the director is to take the written word and change things that don't work on screen. It seems to me that this director requires their script writers to be the drivers. Like, he will focus on making everything pretty. The frames will be gorgeous. Everyone will be perfectly cast look-wise. The looks will be great. But the script writer has to have, basically give him
to
storyboard
troubleshoot it,
every...
right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is his job, actually. Okay, I'll tell you why I find him so self-indulgent, because dude, it's 2021. When was Queen In-hun's Man? That was almost a decade back.
2012, but not his drama.
Not his drama, but 2012, man. And they did time travel, so that was time travel. Yes, it was magical time travel. It was time travel. I was done beautifully. And I don't actually remember too many fantasy dramas before that. 2010 to 2012 was where the sudden boom of nascent fantasy drama started happening. Before that...
And also cable, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, cable. So before that, you basically just had the Makjang type stuff. I mean, you had Goong in 2006, and that kind of spread, that kind of started all of these high school dramas and all of that stuff. But you only started having fantasy from 2010-ish. I forget which drama... It's somewhere. It's around 2010 that some drama happened, and it was a
Secret
boom.
Garden.
Wasn't that 2013? Or am I confused?
No, that was 2010.
Oh,
2010.
Then it must have been Secret Garden. So it was something. It just started a boom. And so you did time travel amazingly in 2012. This same director, of course, did a series of, what is the writer's name? Kim Byung-soo. Kim Byung-soo of Queen In-hun's Man did a lot of dramas after that. Some of them completely bombed, like The Bride of Habaek, and also did a Korean Odyssey. Oh, by the way, he also directed Scripting Your Destiny, which is this mini web series, and it's kind of mocks Goblin, but like in a very, affectionate way. It make references.
But wasn't that also a Kim In-suk project? So that would make sense.
Right.
Oh, before we move on from the structure, though, there was one more thing I wanted to add. Can I do that?
Yeah, go on.
Which is sort of like very related and adjacent to like the circular structure of the narrative, which is the bookending pattern, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
So and it does this, like, it does it episodally, but then it also does it like as a whole. And yeah, I just really enjoy that kind of structure. But it's also true that it does not emerge until you're quite a bit of the way in. Like, you don't realize that that's the pattern until, episode 7, 8, 12. And that's probably far too long for many people to wait. And yet it was worth the wait.
I completely agree. It was worth the wait. I was also just thinking that Circle, which is the only sci-fi...
such a good show.
Right?
Whenever you say sci-fi, I always, like,
immediately.
You say sci-fi, I say Circle. Yeah.
Right, because you can't really think of too many sci-fi and Korean dramas to begin with. So when there's a good one, it really sticks to your head. And for me, Sisyphus is almost up there with Circle. It's one of the few dramas that I would be like, yes, pure sci-fi, here, watch.
And intentionally.
Yeah, intentionally. And Circle had a similar, it's not a pacing issue. It's unfolding style in that you had no clue what the mystery was. Like,
You didn't.
it was no,
Yet.
I hadn't read the description at all. I'd gone in blind. So for the first 2-3 episodes, I was, what is going on?
You actually don't know what the show is about. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, and also the future characters, like you don't know who amongst the future characters is the past character. Like, so you're speculating. It's just, yeah.
But see, this is probably what Circle did in a very superior way compared to this show, is that it made, like, the tension was so taut that even though you have no idea what's going on for like 3 episodes or 4 episodes, and that was a 12 episoder, so remember that your narrative like time is used very, very well because it's very finite. You have no idea what's going on, but you are there.
Yeah.
Because you want to know what happens next.
Yeah.
And you're holding all of this information in your brain and they're giving it to you in a way that each thing that you learn adds up to each thing that you knew.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't want to say Sisyphus failed on it because it doesn't ultimately fail, but it does that rationing of information and parceling it out. It didn't perhaps do it in the best proportions, but it still did it. I feel like maybe it just depends on your mood, to be honest. There are days where I'm like, I don't have the patience for a slow drama. Like I just recently, after my Ramadan break, I just picked up Nevalera again. And I've found myself speed watching it because it's going slowly. I love it, but I want it to go faster. But then I remember when I was watching it before, I was really sort of in the slow moments. And I haven't speed watched for quite some time.
Yeah.
And I forgot that I could do that. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's very much a mood thing. It depends on how you feel at the time. Maybe there are people who, like, Sisyphus frustrated them now, but on a different day they'd be like, you know what, I'm just gonna keep watching.
Yeah. And also, I mean, poor K-dramas, man. We constantly complain that second halves are weaker. With this drama, the second half was stronger.
The second half was so much stronger, yeah.
Should we just be happy and stop complaining now?
Honestly, it's such a, there's no way to predict which thing is going to keep you watching and what's going to make you drop something. I wanted to add also about the repertoire of K-drama sci-fi.
Yeah.
Another Joseon drama, because I don't know if did you watch the sort of the making specials of Circle?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, go watch it. It's really good. Go also watch Circle again because
okay. Yeah, I am watching Circle again, actually.
Oh, okay. So they had this making special afterwards where they talk about the difficulty of creating sci-fi for K-drama audiences, because K-drama audiences do not know sci-fi. It's not a familiar genre for them.
Yeah.
It's something you have to really work hard to convince people to watch, because it's not like weekday mukbang or a show. You can't drop in on the show because you have no idea what's going on. Yeah. You have to follow that show from the beginning to the end. And that's one of the sort of baked in, it's not a problem, but it's a characteristic of how you watch Long Yak sci-fi. I can't say that. And like, unless it's like Star Trek or something, sci-fi often by its nature is Long Yak, because you need time to do things like world building and setting up the plot of the story. So, that first quarter, at minimum first quarter, is going to be spent on doing like the slog of setting up the story. You have to bear through. And I think this is true. Like, I can think of this in many other shows, not all Korean, which is where like the first, and even in books, like the first 100 pages are hard work. But then the story starts because they've set you up and now you're good to go.
Yeah.
What was I going to actually say here though? Oh, right. Sci-fi and Circle and how they actually talked about, we were making a sci-fi and we knew these were the problems that were going in. Yeah. So I rewatched God's Gift 14 Days quite recently, by which I mean like 6 months ago. And I think I've talked about rewatching it frequently without actually talking about the rewatch. So they also have a making special where the production team talk about exactly the same thing. And that was 2014, about the problems of making sci-fi and how God's Gift was essentially a sci-fi. And I didn't think of God's Gift as a sci-fi. But, it was time travel. It was about trying to change specific outcomes with the knowledge that you had of the future. So yeah, I mean, actually it was hard sci-fi. I mean, not hard, but because there was that magical mechanism that lands them in the past. So in that sense, it wasn't hard. But the time issues, they required a scientific rigor to them. And it required all of this, that's a completely separate, I was going to say the foreshadowing and the way that they interlace these timelines and to then get to the end and look back at all the other stuff. So it did that really well. Completely different tangent. But what I mean to say is that every time K-drama does sci-fi, it's this sort of an intentioned effort where they know it may not have a payoff, even if they have an enormous budget.
Yeah, true.
And it's sort of trial and error. It still is. Like, you have to have the space to do it wrong, because otherwise you're not going to, figure out how to do it better.
That's true. And also maybe an explanation as to why the director chose the style he did. Because watching this drama, you can see director Jin-hyuk's touch in that I have seen this in Legend of the Blue Sea. I've seen this in City Hunter. He directed this not as a sci-fi, but as a thriller. So he did the mundane life in the first third, and then he did the development of the conflict, and then he did the payoff. It has a thriller's arc. And that may have worked with a slightly different story, but in a story that has such a large canvas, it just got stretched out too much. That's how I see it. And here's the thing, because we have watched so many Western sci-fi, audiences like us, we watch this and we are like, why didn't you do this? This would have been, or at least that's what I do. I've been mentally rewriting Sisyphus's first half for months now. Like a simple thing that, I'm sorry, I'm going to waste a bit of the time of the podcast and go into this. For instance, I kept thinking that instead of revealing Seo-hae's time in post-apocalypse Korea, several episodes down the line, and instead of Seo-hae's introduction was so gormless and frustrating. You see her in this cave-like structure. She enters, she has a conversation with her dad where he's like, don't meet Tae-sol, promise me. And then she goes in and she emerges in this train yard. And there are people chasing her. And she's in this shirt. And she's on top of a train. And she's just lounging there while all of these people are kind of cornering her. And then it just cuts away. And you don't know how did she get away from there? Also, why is she sunbathing at night on top of a train? Okay, I'm sorry. I will not go into that. My point is that instead of doing that dumbass thing, you know what I keep thinking? The best way to start this show, instead of inside the uploader, would probably have been a glimpse of post-apocalypse. Start at post-apocalypse. And at some point, while Seo-hae is walking in that horribly destroyed city, just transition into current day Seoul or current day Korea.
That would have been cool.
And just do that transition where the screen kind of just shifts and part of it is broken and part of it is whole, and then suddenly the entire screen is of whole current day Seoul, and she's walking in current day Seoul and she's completely lost or something like that. Point is, you can start every single episode by showing a little bit of Seo-hae's experience in post-apocalypse and then somehow transition back to current day, where either her actions are being mirrored or something she learned in post-apocalypse is being applied to current day. We have seen the structure done so many times, and I could cry. It would have worked so well with this drama.
Now that you've said it, I feel like, oh, why didn't we have that? You missed your calling, P. You should have been a director.
I should have been whoever sits behind the director and says, this is crap, we do this.
Yet, all of that said, I will say that Sisyphus has presented, of all the K-dramas I've watched, it's presented the most complex time travel.
It absolutely
has. It clearly understood all the various time travel theories. And there were moments of it and if you ask any person who is an expert in the time travel genre, they would probably put Dark at the top of the pyramid of time travel shows. And there were points of that where I was like, oh, this is like Dark. And
which is a German drama, by the way, guys.
Oh yeah, sorry. German Netflix time travel thriller, very dark. Not for everybody. I mean, it was barely even for me. I dropped that show 6 episodes in until a friend of ours told me a particular spoiler, which I was like, And then I just had to go back, and that was it. But anyway, that show, I think, is a kind of an object lesson in how to do time travel, where the time travel is as scientifically rigorous, and I'm saying that in air quotes, as it's possible to be for something that isn't a thing. So in that sense, I think Sisyphus is the most advanced offering in the time travel genre for K-dramas.
Yeah, agreed. And also, when a story has been comprehensively told is when you can come up with speculations and theories and then go to the story and then run the program and see if this speculation works. Because all of the speculations I'm reading online, I'm like, no, this doesn't work because at this point, this person would be this much old. And so, that would not work if they went back in time. My point is your foundation has to be solid for you to run these theories over them, But if there were loopholes to begin with, you wouldn't be able to speculate with such joy.
Yeah. And the writer had clearly watched many time travel dramas, right?
Yeah.
I felt like that really showed.
It did.
In a good way. We should probably move on to talking about the actual show. We spent like an hour talking about all of the stuff about the show.
Yeah.
But there's a lot to talk about in like characters and heroes and villains. And
yeah, there is. But I think the reason we're so obsessed with the story, the narrative itself, was because the narrative was kind of the hero of the drama.
It was.
The actors, yes, but we were watching it for the story once the story started getting told.
Yeah, that's a really good point because, and this is an observation that you made in your video as well, which is that many of the characters, and you said this about female characters, but I feel this is also true for nearly all of the characters in this show, that they existed in archetypes. And that meant that the characters in themselves were not necessarily interesting. Like, Sigma as a villain was not really interesting in himself. He was interesting as a symbol. And, like he was literally a symbol. But also that came out a little less in the very central characters. But as you got outwards in like your secondary characters and even your tertiary characters, they often presented better if you thought about the role that they played as a character rather than who they were as characters. Like, for example, can I just say, I was about to say, like, for example, Son, I was so attached to my theory of Son being Sigma, and I'm still disappointed that he wasn't, because that would have been such a good turn. Yeah, okay.
But it would have been inexplicable. I mean, Sun was just such a ball of sunshine. And also, one of the best, I don't know, directorial and editorial choices was how they shot his narrative of how he won the lottery.
Oh, that was so good.
That one scene blew me away. I'm like, I'm watching a totally different drama right now. What is happening? But it suited his character so well when he was telling the story. And I'm like, I wish more characters in this drama would tell stories. That would be so good.
They kind of do, though. Interestingly, Sisyphus, for a drama where we are really, like, we talked so much about the action, they do a lot of character storytelling. Like, there's all these points where Jo Seung-woo, I've forgotten his character name already, Tae-sul, is telling stories about himself. And like that, that sort of that narrator's voice, it does happen a lot. Now that I'm thinking about it, we had it a lot.
True, we did.
And yeah, I really enjoyed that. I think it was that wistful, that sort of that sense of loss and grief and just like a wistful tone in a drama always gets me. And that OST, that song, that's just the one.
The OST was so... Yeah. And its variations, they were just so good. And it really got me in the... I don't know, it got me in the heart and got me in the mood of watching like a proper, expansive... something I wanted to say again, man, these points just like, they do not come to me in time. I mean, I think you mentioned at the very beginning that... you don't really like reading sci-fi so much as you like watching them.
I hate reading sci-fi. I never do it.
For me, I don't like hard sci-fi fiction like written. I realized that when I was reading Asimov and stuff as a kid, I wasn't like I read it because I had liked some sci-fi, but I couldn't figure out why I didn't like this. I mean, I have read enough hard sci-fi that I get all references, but I didn't enjoy them. You know what I enjoy though? Space opera. Space operas are the best. And I realized that it's space operas that actually get turned into television.
True.
Dramas,
that is very
like
true.
Western time travel, they're all space opera. They are just so freaking dramatic. There is nothing hard sci-fi about them. So I'm sorry, this point came too late.
No, but as you were talking, I realized like why, because you're talking about like Philip K. Dick and people like, and as, or maybe you weren't, and I was thinking of that and acting like you could read my brain. But hard sci-fi, especially written by men in books, I just realized this, that they have no EQ. Like, they're all IQ, no EQ. And I need my EQ. That's why I read. This is why I consume stories. Because for me, it's about feeling feelings. And, you know, androids dreaming of electric sheep is not for... It's... I know they pose these very interesting philosophical inquiries. And on a particular day, maybe I'll be like, okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. But for the most part, that's not why I read, and it's not why I watch TV. And, you know, more power to people who love them. And obviously people do, because these authors are rich and popular and amazing. But not for me. And this is kind of why the collision of K-drama with sci-fi is one that I find more exciting than a plain Western one, because they really bring that emotional core to a story. And the same in Sisyphus. Like, there are things in Sisyphus that are some of the relationships are so powerful. Despite everything we've said, like, the relationship between Taesul and Seo-hae is so beautiful. And I think the absolute best relationship in the entire drama was like between Seo-hae and her dad.
Yeah.
And like, it wants to take you on an emotional journey. And that's what like K-dramas do. They want to take you on an emotional journey. But like, the thing with sci-fi is it adds the extra element of also having to take you on the sci-fi journey.
True. Okay, so we were talking about Taesul before I digressed away. And I wanted to talk a bit about his arc because, first of all, I complained so much about the show focusing on Taesul and not telling the actual time travel story in the first half. But Taesul's story is actually interesting. The drama does this weird thing where they try to make him into that archetype. You know, the billionaire playboy philanthropist, the Iron Man
Tony Stark.
Tony Stark.
Was that his name? Did I say that wrong? I don't know who he is, but now I know. Like,
yeah, Tony Stark. That's right. They do a couple of these, right? Of course, he is definitely rich. He is a genius. He's not a playboy though. Like, they really try, but poor boy, he's clearly not a playboy.
He's a nerd. He's a nerd with no EQ.
Nerd. No EQ, a lot of entitlement, but not chauvinistic entitlement. I think what I loved most about Taesul was how quick he was to realize that Seo-hae was just more competent than him at survival. And he was like, yes, please help me live. I will try to think of, smart things to do in the background. Yeah.
He's practical.
I really love that.
I mean, you don't get to billionaire status without being incredibly practical and recognizing how to use people's talents in the best ways.
I suppose. Yeah. He was very good at delegating, so he didn't have to do the work. That's great. Except, of course, delegating too much meant that he ended up losing the company.
Yeah, I mean, can we talk about how he was a really trash friend? Which is sort of the root of his downfall.
Yeah. Let's talk about how every villain in this story became a villain because Taesul was a jerk to them.
Although, in fairness, like, if we consider Sigma's backstory, he was not a jerk to Sigma to begin with. Sigma, and this is interesting because it shows you the contrast between the characters, is that Sigma didn't actually have a real relationship with Taesul. And what was the name? Seung-woo, the Sigma's original name. Was that Seung-woo?
I do not remember.
Yeah. But I guess this is why Sigma is presented as the villain, because he was driven by his sense of entitlement. The world owes me something. Taesul owes me something. I did not deserve to be treated in this way. And in some respects, he's right. He didn't deserve to be treated in the very inhumane ways in which he was treated. But also his expectations are what led him to be treated in that way. And his expectations were not reasonable. You know? which is very fluffy without... I'm just assuming everyone's watched the drama at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, of course, the system failed him in that he came from an abusive family. There were clear signs of abuse on his face, but the teachers did nothing about it.
And like, it wasn't Taesol's job to fix that. Like, he didn't have the capacity. He was a kid. They were the same age, right? There was no way that he could have been the savior for baby Sigma.
That's true.
So to put that burden on him is an unfair ask of his character. But Taesol is fully 100% responsible for how he treats him as an adult in the future. And that was trash. You're a bad friend and a bad human being.
Yeah, a bad human being. And it is shown as a turning point for Sigma. Like, he is at his absolute worst when he's trying to kill himself. And then here comes his classmate, whom he hates because the classmate has succeeded so much. Love is obsessed and, in both.
As in he wants to be,
Yeah, he kind of wants to be him, be his best friend, be him, anything like super.
I mean, okay, we'll talk about the end at the end.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. But there are so many things to talk about later. Dude, will this ever end?
It's going to have to, because I have to go to work soon.
Okay, so the system failed Sigma. Yes, but the show actually shows that point as the turning point for Sigma, in that he was at rock bottom trying to kill himself. Then suddenly this guy comes whom he hasn't seen in years, who's this really rich person. And he comes and he treats him like dirt and tries to murder him. And he's like, well, the world is shit on top of crap and clearly nobody deserves to live. I mean,
you can't blame him, right?
I can't blame him. I mean, Park Bo-young in Doom at your service asked for destruction for the world for far less, kind of. So it's just... yeah, him being a jerk to Sigma definitely was a turning point. And it's not a problem so much, but something that I noticed about Taesol's arc, like even at the very end, where Taesol is smart enough to realize that someone being an asshole to Sigma at that exact point may have created the current Sigma. So someone
I don't know that he did.
I think he kind of did because he chose...
Sohe's dad.
To
go... Yeah, but he told Sohe's dad to take Sigma out... before he was Sigma, to sort of take him out of the picture. He didn't tell him to be nice to him.
That's true.
He didn't get it until the end. See, Taesol is this person who is...
Did he get it then?
I don't think he did. Taesol, to me, he is that person who... he's only good to the people he loves.
Yeah.
Like, he's not essentially a destructive person, so he's not necessarily going to, like, destroy the world like Sigma. But in many ways, I'm not sure how different he is from him in his non-caring of other people, and the people he likes, he's good to. And I always find that a little, like in real life, I don't like people like that. Like, you can't be a jerk to everyone else, and it's okay because you're good to your friends. Yes, you should be good to your friends. But there's also a baseline level of good that you need to be to other human beings. Like, to treat them as human beings, not as replaceable objects or dispensable pieces in the grand drama of your life,
Yeah. Agreed.
I don't know if I'm sort of being looking at him worse than he actually is, because I say that, but I also really love Taesol, so...
We love Taesol because of Cho Seung-woo. Let's be realistic. It's how he played this character where he was...
In a lesser actor... yeah, that might not have been a likable character.
Yeah, in a lesser actor, we would have been just like tearing him apart, I think. Yeah. But okay, so this is interesting. I like thinking of it both ways. On the one hand, it's perfectly possible that Taesol went to Sohe's dad and was like, I'm outsourcing the kindness to you. I'm not capable of it, so you show him kindness.
But we actually get that. Like, we get the part, like in the show, we get that moment where he tells Sohe's dad what to do. And there's no instruction of being kind to this man.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely
There's just remove him from the board. That's all there is.
Yeah. I just assumed that he chose him because he knows the entire situation.
He chose him because he was at his disposal. Because he was a piece that was available for him to use. So he used him.
Yeah, you've convinced me. You're probably right. I was giving him too much credit.
But, I don't think there's malice in him. So, and this is the difference. There's no malice in him. There's just no empathy either.
Exactly. He doesn't realize, which makes him kind of dumb if you think about it. Like, this genius character is actually not very smart. Okay, this is something else that I found so interesting in this drama. That Seo-hae does most of the really smart moves because she gets the other person. Like she gets how the mind of the other person works. Like in the way she figures out how to handle the Asia Mart boss, right? She just has a really... She's empathetic, yes, but also she is clever that way. Whereas Taesul never even considers the other person's perspective. It's a weakness.
Which is interesting because Seo-hae has grown up without humans around her, apart from her dad, you know?
Yeah, agreed. Okay, I also want to talk about Eddy Kim briefly. Yes, Taesul is unempathetic, and you see this very much in Eddy Kim's arc. I mean, yes, he was a bit of a parasite of a friend. You can clearly see that. Like, he met Taesul in college, realized he's this brilliant boy, but has nobody around him, and kind of made himself into a slave/friend. Like,
do you think that? Because I actually see he's a genuine friend. Like, I feel like...
He said it.
Okay, he
said
did.
it like that. At one point, he was like, I made myself indispensable to you. I washed your underwear. I was there to do everything for you. Have you ever, like, turned around and said thanks? I mean, I get it, but he didn't do it out of genuine friendship. He did it because he had spent 8 years trying to get his PhD papers, I don't know, approved or something, whatever you do with PhD papers. And this guy, Taesul, he came in and his stuff was like, I think he was out in like a year or something, which I don't know how you do that with PhD, but whatever. I mean, point is, he's genius. Everybody thinks he's genius. Everybody also thinks he's a jock and doesn't want to be his friend. And Eddy saw an opportunity in that. You should just go back and watch that scene where he explains how he met Taesul. He says it like, I realized that he had no friends. I overheard these professors talking about his paper, and I realized that the thing that I'd been trying to do for 8 years, he hadn't even come into the program and he had already succeeded. So I found him and I became his friends and I did everything for him. I mean, he says it like that, but what does it mean? It means that he decided, oh, hey.
I feel like though he said it like that, I do think he was a genuine friend. I think what he said afterwards, that was him looking back on his friendship and all of the ways in which he'd sort of been the lower hand in that friendship. And also, I mean, that was spurned feelings. He could shoot Seo-hae out of the bitterness in his heart. Like, you know, that feeling can destroy the world. But I genuinely, like, I didn't even suspect him. And I think this came throughout the entire show, that he had a genuine attachment to Taesul. And, like, for example, when he gets shot, or when Taesul gets shot right at the beginning, he jumps right in front of him. And that's not a calculated move. That's the instinct to save your friend. When they're gaslighting him, his instincts are always the instincts of a friend. And despite what he does later, and I think what he does later is because of the bitterness that has arisen from this unequal, one-sided friendship, I think his friendship was genuine. And even to the end, the things that he did was out of emotional pain, not out of, like, sociopathy or, you know? I've said a lot.
So I don't think it's a matter of sociopathy so much as it is a matter of him creating a friendship in his head and also establishing a dynamic that will never let their relationship be that friendship. He found Taesul. He says it himself, and I believe him when he says it. He attached himself to Taesul in college because he overheard his professors talking about Taesul's work. He had a clear motive when he approached Taesul, and it was not because it was an organic friendship that just bloomed. He made himself a part of Taesul's life so that whatever Taesul did, he would be a part of it. It was going to be kind of like Taesul's brilliance helping him be better. Like, we try to surround ourselves with people better than us so that we can also grow. That's a perfectly normal thing to do. There's nothing bad about it. But the problem is that he went one step further in that he put himself in a subservient position to Taesul. His admiration for Taesul's mind was so vast. He thought he was inferior and he acted like he was inferior. So his years later, when he's frustrated that he has been in the background helping Taesul for so long, but Taesul never seems to see him as a friend, well, you have put yourself in a position where Taesul has seen you as an employee probably since you were in college together. You have always acted like an employee.
I actually, I don't agree. And I can see why you would interpret it that way. But I think that Seung-bok's friendship was offered to him in good faith. And I think, like, if you think about, and like I'm thinking, for example, like, you know, when you have siblings, like little brothers or little sisters, or that one hapless, hopeless friend, sure, Taesul is a genius, but he was so hapless in every other way, he needed Seung-bok. And I feel like what Seung-bok does for him, he does as a kind of, you are actually hopeless everything else. You know, if it weren't for me, you'd still be in like your shed in the middle of a barley field or whatever it is. But like, the problem isn't Seung-bok. He offers his friendship in good faith. The problem is Taesul, who does not reciprocate friendship in the way that we understand a friendship to be reciprocated. See, Taesul thinks he's being a good friend. He actually doesn't have any idea what it is to be a friend at all, never mind a good friend. So even though you could argue that Seung-bok is like a parasitic friend, I feel that his intention was not, like, the way that he invested himself in the friendship was intended to be symbiotic. And because Taesul is such an idiot, he doesn't receive anything. Like, what Seung-bok does for Taesul, they're things close friends do for each other. Except Taesul is an idiot.
Except Taesul would never do that for Seung-bok.
Exactly.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, that's what makes the friendship toxic. But also, no, I agree. He didn't have to, like, he should have bailed, but because he was benefiting, he didn't. So
exactly my point. Like, think of this in terms of a romantic relationship. If we had seen a situation where a wife keeps helping the husband succeed and never gets a thanks in return, we would have been like, why haven't you walked away?
But then,
what is wrong with you?
But that's also,
we know that the problem is with the guy, like with Taesul in this case. But we also know that you, like, okay, maybe the husband-wife thing works, it does not work.
I mean, it somewhat does,
because there are very different. I mean, think about like the social pressures on a wife to stay with a husband. It doesn't work.
I mean, this is sort of, it's not like, even if you take away social pressures, there are still internal pressures. There's like, you're embedded in this relationship.
Sure.
It's your life at this point. So walking away from that means walking away from much more than walking away from a person.
Yeah, but also returning to their friendship though, another point. When did Taesul ever hint to Eddy Kim that he has to sacrifice his love for Taesul? Nobody hinted that. Eddy realized that, what's her name? Sojin was interested in Taesul and he just gave up and walked away. Taesul never asked him to. But the way Eddy seemed to see this thing was, I gave up. Yeah, one more thing for you.
He sees himself as giving things up, but nobody asked you to give it up.
The heck? That was never even a competition. I mean, clearly Taesul wasn't even that interested in Sojin. They broke up, like, he cheated on her.
See,
I mean,
maybe this is... No, I agree. Actually, like, all of that, I agree. But then these are, like, the character flaws that human beings have, which for Seung-bok is that he was a giver, but not in a good way. I mean, in a good way, but also in a way that he harmed himself where he didn't need to. And, you know, this is very human. You see this in so many people, particularly in the most toxic relationships where you have, you know, the narcissist and the empath, that sort of the darkest combination that you could possibly have. Someone who takes and takes and takes, and someone who gives and gives and gives. And I'm not saying that either of those, like Taesul or Seung-bok, are necessarily the worst expression of that. But there is a shadow of that dynamic, or more than a shadow of that dynamic between them. But there's also, like, you have to have self-awareness, and this is the thing that actually perhaps characterizes all of the characters in this drama, apart from Seo-hae and perhaps apart from, like, Son and people. But definitely between Taesul, Seung-bok, Sigma, all of them have no self-awareness of their own flaws, of the ways in which they affect other people through their actions, and also the things you just don't have to take from people. And I wrote this in my review, that yes, the situation that these characters were in, particularly Sigma and Seung-bok, who, by the way, is Eddy Kim, and I just got used to calling him Seung-bok, is that these relationships are voluntary. But the problem is, when you're in the middle of a relationship, you rarely remember or realize that you don't have to be there if it's bad. Like, you are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to fold up this friendship and say, you know what, it was good while it lasted, and I'm going to now go somewhere else where people treat me well, where I'm valued for the contributions that I make, where I'm not the one giving more than I'm receiving, and where there's an equitable, reciprocal relationship between people.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe that's why those two are our villains in the end. And that's why Taesul, he has to sacrifice himself to pay the price of the life that he's lived. So,
but But here's the sad thing. I don't think he even realizes that that is the price he's paying. He seemed to think, oh, well, people will keep coming for us unless I end myself. But he doesn't seem to realize it's my actions that have in some ways caused everything we are going through.
Yeah, I feel that the realization that he has that causes him to finally make the choice to sacrifice himself is that the only way that Seo-hae can live is if he can end it by dying. Like, that's literally the only way Seo-hae will survive. Maybe not this Seo-hae, but that's the original Seo-hae. And that's, like, maybe it's the first altruistic thing he's ever thought in his life. Which perhaps is a little unfair.
And as you said, he's only capable of thinking of that for Seo-hae because she's the only one he loves, aside from his brother maybe. But even with his brother.
But his brother lives as well, so that's like a knock-on benefit. But yeah, you're right. Even with his brother, he's not that altruistic because he's a taker. And like
his brother is clearly a giver.
Yeah, and the thing with Taesol, and I'm just realizing this as I'm saying it, is that he's learning how to give. And his tragedy is that the culmination of his character is that the only thing that is going to be sufficient for him to give and therefore atone for all of his sins is to actually give his life.
A life badly lived.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only way you can redeem yourself at this point. There's no other redemption for you. And we say this like he's a villain, but in some ways he kind of is. Maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, he's certainly a villain to the villains. He's a villain to Seung-bok. He's a villain to, what's his name, Sigma. And
well, if you think about it, though, in terms of the story, if the hero is Sisyphus Seo-hae, who's coming back to stop apocalypse from happening, the villain is Taesol because he's the one who makes the uploader that makes apocalypse possible.
You're right.
So her mission is always to stop Taesol. Her mission is never to stop Sigma.
This is true.
It's Taesol who decides, oh, Sigma must be stopped. But honestly, he only had to stop himself.
It's true. But as long as he was alive, he'd never be able to stop himself because he was alive. So he had to die. And that would actually, as an ending, that was perfect. It was such a good ending until
and then they did a chapter of what, 19?
Oh God.
Which is a reference to Harry Potter's last book, by the way.
Yeah. No, it was 19 years later. We did not need 19 years later.
We did not need that. Oh, something else that struck me much later was that it's interesting that Sigma is the one who sends Seo-hae back. We don't know who sent Seo-hae back the first time because the Sigma who sends Seo-hae back is the one who knows that Seo-hae has a crucial part to play in their story. But how did she get on the uploader and go the first time? Presumably, there was still the horrible, social gap. Like, she was basically a scavenger, whereas the elites were like living in their own world. She couldn't possibly have afforded to get on the uploader. So, like, how did she get on it? Guns blazing. But that's not my point. I'm digressing. It's interesting that Sigma sends Seo-hae back after Taesol has created the blueprint for the uploader. Because technically the uploader already existed, at least in theory, if not in practice, when Seo-hae. So Seo-hae never could win alone. She needed Taesol to somehow agree with her that, okay, fine, you know what, let's not do this. But it had already been out of Taesol's head and it had come into the world. Sooner or later, someone or the other would have figured out how to make the uploader work. And I suppose in the original timeline, that was Eddy Kim, because remember at some point, Sigma says that to Eddy, that you're the one who creates the uploader. But not this Eddy Kim, not this version.
Yeah, but he must have had the blueprints. I don't think that anyone could have done that without the blueprints or another genius. So that's
possibly. But that's exactly the thing. Like, it existed already. Also, now I'm starting to think of loopholes in the story, which I wish I hadn't. The uploader exists below, though. Like, it exists under the church. Even though Taesol kills himself, there is a functional uploader right below them.
Was it an upload? Yeah, it was. You're right.
And the Sigma who turned nice but may not be nice now knows everything. And there is a functional uploader below the church. I'm I'm just pointing out. That
No, but then you would assume, remember he programmed it to only work once and that was it? And no one else could crack that code.
Oh, yeah. But the system exists. That's hubris, isn't it? Nobody else will ever be able to crack that code.
Well, maybe that's the Dark Season 2 coming. Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've basically pretty much talked about everything.
We pretty much covered everything. I just
Yeah.
want to say, not discuss it so much, just say it as a statement that Taesol and Seo-hae were really great partners. I mean, even if they never had a romantic line, it would have been still a great partnership. In the end, they could have had that same death scene. It would have been just as emotionally impactful, even if there was no romance between them.
Yeah.
Which is why it worked for me, their relationship. I wasn't looking forward to a happily ever after. I was looking forward to a really great partnership, and that we got that in spades.
Yeah. And I have to say that, like, the romance, it wasn't like it was really a high key romance. It's a romance of what could have been if we had met in a normal way without the apocalypse hanging over our heads and the fact that you actually are not in the same timeline as me. But like, I really love the way they did those moments between them, though. They were so beautiful.
Yeah.
And just as a final thing before we finish up, I said that the turning point was episode 7 for me, but I just realized as we were talking, actually it wasn't. The turning point was when that guitar kicked in at the end of episode 2. That's the music you need if you want me to watch your drama. Because sometimes I would just watch it just to hear that.
I love the OST so much.
Wistful guitar. Wistful guitar really just destroys me. It's just, you want to grab me, use that always. And I was so sad because they barely used it in the second half. And then they finally brought it back for the end credits. And I was like, oh my God. I have died and gone to heaven, except heaven is an aeroplane.
Oh gosh, why?
And now we have to end our episode like this.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for listening, everyone.
Bye-bye.
So, if you want to follow us on Twitter, you can find us at Dramas Overflow. You can find me, personally, not using Twitter much at all, at Not Now Sayo.
You can find me, Paroma, at Festa Faster. You can find us on Instagram at dramasoverflowers_. And you can email us at dramasoverflowers@gmail.com.
And if you want to find us on Facebook, just search Dramas Over Flowers and you can follow us there. And come and read us on our blog, which is dramasoverflowers.net, where all of our Sisyphus reviews live. The 20,000 word long monsters that they are. Come and read them. We put a lot of time and effort into them.
And the one with the time travel map of loopiness, which Seo-hae has created.
That was episode 11 and 12.
Yes. Read that review in case we forget to link it. And finally, Dramas Over Flowers is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.
Yay! We got to the end. Or did we get to the beginning?
Bye,
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.